Chapter 23 of The Circular Staircase. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 23. While the Stables Burned. About 9 o'clock that night, Liddy came into the living room and reported that one of the housemaids declared she had seen two men slip around the corner of the stable. Gertrude had been sitting staring in front of her, jumping at every sound. Now she turned on Liddy pettishly. "I declare, Liddy," she said, "you are a bundle of nerves. What if Eliza did see some men around the stable? It may have just been Warner and Alex." "Warner is in the kitchen, miss," said Liddy with dignity, "and if you'd come through what I have, you would be a bundle of nerves too. Miss Rachel, I'll be thankful if you'd give me my month's wages tomorrow. I'll be going to my sister's." "Very well," I said, to her evident amazement. "I will make out the check. Warner can take you down to the noon train." Liddy's face was really funny. "You'll have a nice time at your sister's," I went on. 5 children, hasn't she?" "That's it," Liddy said, suddenly bursting into tears. "Send me away after all these years, and your new shawl only half done, and no one knowing how to fix the water for your bath." "It's time I learned to prepare my own bath," I was knitting complacently. But Gertrude got up and put her arms around Liddy's shaking shoulders. "You are 2 big babies," she said soothingly. "Neither one of you could get along for an hour without the other. So stop quarreling and be good. Liddy, go right up and lay out Auntie's night things. She's going to bed early." After Liddy had gone, I began to think about the men at the stable, and I grew more and more anxious. Halsey was aimlessly knocking on the billiard balls around in the billiard room, and I called to him. "Halsey," I said when he sauntered in, "is there a policeman in Casanova?" "Constable," he said laconically, "veteran of the war, one arm, in office to conciliate the GAR element. Why?" "Because I am uneasy tonight," and I told him what Liddy had said. "Is there any one you can think of who could be relied on to watch the outside of the house tonight?" "We might get Sam Bohannon from the club," he said thoughtfully. "It wouldn't be a bad scheme. He's a smart darky, and with his mouth shut and his shirt front covered, you couldn't see him a yard off in the dark." Halsey conferred with Alex, and the result was in an hour with Sam. His instructions were simple. There had been numerous attempts to break into the house, and it was his intention not to drive intruders away, but to capture them. If Sam saw anything suspicious outside, he was to tap at the east entry, where Alex and Halsey were to alternate in keeping watch through the night. It was a comfortable feeling of security that I went to bed that night. The door between Gertrude's rooms and mine had been opened, and with the doors into the hall bolted, we were safe enough, although Liddy persisted in her belief that the doors would prove no obstacles to our disturbers. As before, Halsey watched the east entry from 10 till 2. He had an eye to comfort, and he kept vigil in a heavy oak chair, very large and deep. We went upstairs rather early, and through the open door Gertrude and I kept up a running fire of conversation. Liddy was brushing my hair, and Gertrude was doing her own, with a long free sweep of her strong round arms. "Did you know Miss Armstrong and Louise are in the village?" she called. "No," I replied, startled. "How did you hear it?" "I met the oldest Stewart girl today, the doctor's daughter, and she told me they had not gone back to town after the funeral. They went directly to that little yellow house next to Dr. Walker's, and are apparently settled there. They took the house furnished for the summer." "Why, it's such a bandbox," I said. "I can't imagine Fanny Armstrong in such a place." "It's true, nevertheless. Ella Stewart says that Miss Armstrong has aged terribly, and looks as if she is hardly able to walk." I lay and thought over some of these things until midnight. The electric lights went out then, fading slowly until there was only a red-hot loop to be seen in the bulb, and then even that died away, and we were embarked on the darkness of another night. Apparently, only a few minutes elapsed, during which my eyes were becoming accustomed to the darkness. Then I noticed that the windows were reflecting a faint pinkish light. Liddy noticed it at the same time, and I heard her jump up. At that moment Sam's deep voice boomed from somewhere below. "Fire!" he yelled. "The stable's on fire!" I could see him in the glare dancing up and down on the drive, and a moment later Halsey joined him. Alex was awake and running down the stairs, and in 5 minutes from the time the fire was discovered, 3 of the maids were sitting on their trunks in the drive, although, excepting a few sparks, there was no fire nearer than 100 yards. Gertrude seldom loses her presence of mind, and she ran to the telephone, but by the time the Casanova Volunteer Fire Department came toiling up the hill, the stable was a furnace, with the Dragonfly safe but blistered in the road. Some gasoline exploded just as the volunteer department got to work, which shook their nerves as well as the burning building. The stable, being on a hill, was a torch to attract the population from every direction. Rumor had it that the sunny side was burning, and that it was amazing how many people threw something over their nightclothes and flew to the conflagration. I take it that Casanova has few fires, and Sunnyside was furnishing the people in one way or another the greatest excitement they had had for years. The stable was off the west wing. I hardly know how I came to think of the circular staircase and the unguarded door at its foot. Liddy was putting my clothes into the sheets, preparatory to tossing them out the window, when I found her and could hardly persuade her to stop. "I want you to come with me, Liddy," I said. "Bring a candle and a couple of blankets." She lagged behind considerably when she saw me making for the east wing. At the top of the staircase she balked. "I'm not going down there," she said firmly. "There is no one guarding the door down there," I explained. "Who knows, this may be a scheme to draw everyone away from this end of the house and let someone in here." The instant I had said it, I was convinced I had hit on the explanation, and that perhaps it was already too late. It seemed to me as I listened that I heard stealthy footsteps on the east porch. There was so much shouting outside it was impossible to tell. Liddy was on the point of retreat. "Very well," I said, "then I shall go down alone. Run back to Mr. Halsey's room and get his revolver. Don't shoot down the stairs if you hear a noise. Remember, I shall be down here. And hurry." I put the candle on the floor at the top of the staircase and took off my bedroom slippers. Then I crept down the stairs, going very slowly and listening with all my ears. I was keyed to such a pitch that I felt no fear, like the condemned who sleep and eat the night before execution. I was no longer able to suffer apprehension. I was past that. Just at the foot of the stairs, I stubbed my toe against Halsey's big chair, and had to stand on one foot in soundless agony until the pain subsided to a dull ache. Then I knew I was right, for someone had put a key into the lock and was turning it. For some reason it refused to work, and the key was withdrawn. There was a muttering of voices outside. I had only a second. Another trial, and the door would be open. The candle above made a faint gleam down the well-like staircase, and at that moment, with a second, no more to spare, I thought of a plan. The heavy oak chair almost filled the space between the newel post and the door. With a crash I turned it on its side, wedging it against the door, its legs against the stairs. I could hear a faint scream from Liddy at the crash, and then she came down the stairs in a run, with the revolver held straight out in front of her. "Thank God," she said in a shaking voice. "I thought it was you." I pointed to the door, and she understood. "Call out the windows at the other end of the house," I whispered. "Run! Tell them not to wait for anything." She went up the stairs at that, two at a time. Evidently she collided with the candle, for it went out, and I was left in the darkness. I was really astonishingly cool. I remember stepping over the chair and gluing my ear to the door, and I shall never forget feeling it gave an inch or two there in the darkness, under a steady pressure from without. But the chair held, and although I could hear an ominous cracking of one of the legs, and then, without the slightest warning, the card-room window broke with a crash. I had my finger on the trigger of the revolver, and as I jumped it went off, right through the door. Someone outside swore roundly, and for the first time I could hear what was said. "Only a scratch. Men are at the other end of the house, have the whole rat's nest on us," and a lot of profanity which I couldn't write down. The voices were at the broken window now, and although I was trembling violently, I determined that I would hold them until help came. I moved up the stairs till I could see into the card-room, or rather through it, to the window. As I looked, a small man put his leg over the sill and stepped into the room. The curtain confused him for a moment. Then he turned not towards me, but towards the billiard-room door. I fired again, and something that was glass or china crashed to the ground. Then I ran up the stairs and along the corridor to the main staircase. Gertrude was standing there, trying to locate the shots, and I must have been a peculiar figure, with my hair in crimps, my dressing gown flying, no slippers, and a revolver clutched in my hands. I had no time to talk. There was the sound of footsteps in the lower hall, and someone bounded up the stairs. I'd gone berserk, I think. I leaned over the stair rail and fired again. Halsey below yelled at me. "What are you doing up there?" he yelled. "You missed me by an inch." And then I collapsed and fainted. When I came round, Liddy was rubbing my temples with eau de quinine, and the search was in full blast. Well, the man was gone. The stable burned to the ground, while the crowd cheered at every falling rafter, and the volunteer fire department sprayed it with a garden hose. And in the house, Alex and Halsey searched every corner of the lower floor, finding no one. The truth of my story was shown by the broken window and the overturned chair. That the unknown had got upstairs was almost impossible. He had not used the main staircase, and there was no way to the upper floor on the east wing, and Liddy had been at the window in the west wing, where the servants' stair went up. But we did not go to bed at all. Sam Bohannon and Warner helped in the search, and not a closet escaped scrutiny. Even the cellars were given a thorough overhauling without result. The door in the east entry had a hole through it where my bullet had gone. The hole slanted downward, and the bullet was embedded in the porch. Some reddish stains around it had done execution. "Somebody will walk lame," Halsey said, when he had marked the course of the bullet. "It's too low to have hit anything but a leg or foot. From that time I watched every person I met for a limp, and to this day the man who halts in his walk is an object of suspicion to me. But Casanova had no lame men. The nearest approach to it was an old fellow who tended the safety gates at the railroad, and he, I learned on inquiry, had 2 artificial legs. Our man had gone, and the large and expensive table at Sunnyside was a heap of smoking rafters and charred boards. Warner swore the fire was incendiary, and in view of the attempt to enter the house there seemed to be no doubt of it." End of chapter 23, The Circular Staircase, by Mary Roberts Rinehart.